I think there's a good chance you know a lot of people with a Netflix account, probably a lot of people with a Disney Plus subscription. But what if I told you that actually I think that Apple TV Plus is the best streamer out there? Today on the podcast, if Apple has some of the best shows, why isn't anybody watching? I'm Alamin Abdul Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, look, Apple TV Plus makes some truly great stuff. If I'm honest, some of my favorite shows of the past few years have come out of Apple's streaming service. There's Ted Lasso, there's Severance, there's The Morning Show, which is just utterly unhinged. There's Silo. I'm watching this show right now on the recommendations of my pal Ash and Max, and it's called Presumed Innocent. It's got Jake Gyllenhaal, and it's so good. But after spending $20 billion on shows and movies since it's launched, Apple TV Plus gets fewer viewers in a month than Netflix gets in a day. That's kind of rough. So Apple is set to spend a whole lot less on making movies and television shows. Vulture TV critic Kathryn VanArendonk is here to talk about that decision and whether it signals the end of the streaming wars that we've been talking about. Kathryn, welcome back to the show, friend.
Hello.
Hello. I'm happy that you're here. Listen, let's get into the what before we get into the why. What do we know about Apple making this decision to reduce the spending on movies and TV?
We don't have a lot of information as far as what this actually means specifically. They have started to indicate that they are going to be reducing. They're going to be like, the language is sort of, we're going to be looking at the budgets. We're going to be thinking about how to spend less in this category.
Yeah.
But it is not the kind of announcement that's like a big, like, we will be cutting this percentage or we will be making this many fewer shows. So there's a lot of wiggle room, gray area about what this actually means. But the other thing that we do know is that they have quite a lot of budget to cut if they decide to. They have had to buy their way into the streaming wars kind of late in the game after Netflix and all of these other competitors were already out there. And that was not a cheap purchase for them.
No.
And they have spent all this money on expensive shows. So there's a lot of money that they could cut back if they want to.
Yeah, like when I think about, Netflix's entry into making their own sort of prestige content, I think of the Kevin Spacey show that I try not to think about very often. When I think about Apple TV Plus's sort of big launching show, it was The Morning Show, right? It was like this big, expensive, flashy show. Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, first of all, that is an already expensive top line when it comes to cast, but then you got all of these other stars around them. And so they have shows that cost a lot of money. What's your read on why they have to rein in all the spending?
Well, there are a couple different reasons why this is probably something that they should be doing. And one of them is that we really have very little sense of how many people watch any of these shows.
Right.
We know through these kind of secondary measures, outside firms like Parrot Analytics or Nielsen does their own sort of ways of measuring how many people watch, but Apple has never released any of their inner data about like what this actually how many people actually watch, and more importantly, what it means for them as far as like, if this many people watch this show, then that's good for our business because they don't sell advertising to it.
Yes.
We have no information about like how much money those subscribers are actually paying because they give all these different deals to like get into Apple TV Plus, or whether they watch Apple shows and then buy Apple products. We don't know. So
we don't know how a show is what is a success for them. Yeah.
No, we really have no idea.
Yeah.
And so it's like not at all surprising that this would be a thing that they really need to go about doing, especially because they're so bad at promoting their shows. So few people know they exist.
Yeah, this has been the sort of frustrating thing about loving a lot of these Apple TV Plus shows because they're honestly so good. They've made a lot of excellent TV shows in the last little while. And then, according to this recent report in Bloomberg, it has like Apple TV Plus has 0.2% of TV viewing audiences in the United States. That's incredibly tiny. When you think about the quality of TV that they're making, and you think about the size of audience that they have, you just said something there about their ability to promote these shows. We know that Apple has a capacity to promote them doing all kinds of stuff. Why aren't they getting the message out, you think, about the stuff that they have on the streaming network?
Yeah, it's really baffling. I wish I had a specific answer. I was like, this is exactly what's
Yeah.
happening. I can guess a little bit. One is that they don't have they have a lot of marketing budget behind hardware. They clearly have not done the same kind of investment in these like product shows. And I think part of the reason is that there is this disconnect between whether it matters that anyone watches that particular show
Yeah.
to this company.
Right.
So it's just not something they've invested in. The other thing that I think can be what's happening here is that this was this huge push to make Apple TV Plus a thing that started, in the last decade, even more recently than that.
Yeah.
And so there was this enormous development budget. All of these shows were made.
Yeah.
They are still releasing stuff that was made like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And so when there is this huge lapse between the development of something and the release, the people who made it may not be there anymore, or there's like
they can't do your press run anymore, Yeah.
The mission has changed since you made it. And so there's this big gap between when there was excitement about making a show and how to actually put money behind promoting it.
But see, like the striking thing to me is Apple TV Plus was the first streamer to win Best Picture at the Oscars. They won for Coda a few years ago. Apple TV is regularly nominated in the Emmys, regularly nominated in the Golden Globes. Palm Royale, which is a comedy that like I dare somebody to be like, name the people in Palm Royale, because like it's just not a widely watched show. It's a fun show. It's a fun show that is like a good watch. It's nominated for Best Comedy at this year's Emmys. There is like this giant gap between what they consider to be an achievement, which is to say they win Best Picture at the Oscars. And it's like, what are we doing to get people to know that this product even exists? And I guess, Kathryn, the confusing thing to me about it is that like, there was a moment when everyone said, oh no, the internet is disrupting music. And Apple said, we have an answer for that. And then now we're at this moment where the internet is disrupting television. And I would have assumed maybe that Apple would also have an answer for that. And that does not appear to be the case. Is that surprising to you?
Yeah, I mean, it is surprising to me, largely because of this kind of stuff that you were mentioning before about how good they are promoting themselves in other places.
Yeah.
The answer question is actually not that different from other, like make good television and put it on a streaming service.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of answer that other streaming services have been trying.
Sure.
Promotion is a big part of that, and they've really fallen down on that. But the other thing about that I think is so you really cannot escape is that people want to watch television on the internet, and apparently this is a thing Apple decided it needed to be involved in.
Yeah.
For not a lot of reasons. Like this was an own goal in a lot of ways. And look, I'm glad that they did it because I like so many of these shows, but they had no reason to make this a part of their portfolio when they did. It was just funneling money down a black hole, right?
Yeah.
And with the promise that at some point it would matter, they have never figured out how to actually make that matter. And just on the point of Coda, I will never forget being in a public library, watching a woman walk in and ask the circulation desk how she could watch the best Oscar winner. Where was the DVD? And there is no DVD. This is not a thing. And so there is a real disconnect, I think, between how people want to watch this like popular, not that we should all be making DVDs out here, but like what were they going to tell her? Subscribe to Apple TV Plus on what device that she had that could do that, right? Like, at some point you got to get to the people where they are.
Well, so, okay, just to give listeners an idea of the disconnect between the effort going into making these shows and the effort going into making sure that you watch these shows. Severance, a solid show that I really adored the first season of, and the second season is about to come out pretty soonish, has come in at a price tag of $20 million per episode. That is astronomical television money. That is HBO expenditure when it comes to spending on per episode basis. And so when you are a streamer who is in the business of making $20 million per episode shows that are prestige shows, might I add, and like this is not your primary business. This is like a very much a secondary business, an afterthought. Like, why would Apple want to be in this business to begin with if the thing that made them famous is the computers and the phones? And this is just like, is this pocket money that they're spending on the side? Like, is that your read on this?
It is a little bit. I also do kind of have this theory, as we have been trying to, as critics, sort of look at what an Apple TV Plus show is, what the
Yeah.
kind of identity of these shows are, what kinds of things they make particularly well. They make dad TV
Yeah, they do.
particularly well. And there's this element of it where I'm like, is this just shows that Tim Cook likes? Is that what this is? Are we just, and I'm not mad
I'm
at
not mad
it.
at that either.
I also like these shows, which I also think it's like sort of interesting that there's like pretty good at shows with male leads. Anyhow.
Yes. Yeah.
I've never had a good answer for like why they felt like this was the kind of thing, except that there has always also been this real love affair between tech companies and Hollywood, and this desire to be in this what felt particular. I mean, you have to remember the streaming bubble was a bubble, like this huge buoyant thing for a long time. And everyone was like, we have got to get into this, definitely not a pyramid scheme, right?
Yeah.
And so this was also part of that era of like, if you're not making streaming television, what are you even doing? Now, $20 million an episode, like that's HBO money, but that's not HBO. Like even HBO doesn't spend that money for every episode. That's like their one huge, exciting one. And when Prime spends that money for every episode, like on Rings of Power, you better believe every dang Amazon box you get shipped to your house for a month is going to say Rings of Power on the side of it, right?
Yes.
Apple's never been able to figure how to do that.
Yeah. Just on the idea of them making dad TV, I started watching. I think it was called Hijack, the Idris Elba show. We're talking about like I think it's like a 7 or 8 episode arc, and I swear to God, I had a day off and my family was out of town, and I started watching. I was like, oh, like let me just test out what the show is like, and I started watching at 8 a.m. And I was like, I'll watch a couple episodes and then go about my day. And I swear to God, I did not get up off the couch until 5 p.m. when the show was done. Like and I was like, oh wow, they got me. Like as a dad who wants to be marketed to, thank you for your service. I really appreciate it. When you see Apple's retreat, I guess it's fair. I think it's fair to call it a retreat. When you see their retreat, from spending this much money on the programming that they do, some people have kind of characterized this as the end of the streaming wars, as a sort of a confirmation, hand Netflix the crown, the wars are over. Do you have the same kind of feeling when you look at this moment?
Well, as a person who watches a lot of shows about giant like battles, as I'm thinking about House of the Dragon, the thing about it is that it's not like one big thing ends and then everyone just goes, oh, that's it, the game is over, right? There are kind of all of these battles that will continue to be played out in the margins. I also don't think this is the tipping point. Like it is all of these other things also happening together. And yes, Apple has been spending all of this money. And so when they stop spending all of this money, it is going to be palpable, but they are still a fraction of a Netflix, a Disney Plus, and a Max. And so what this is really, it is really just one small part of this much larger contraction of streaming throughout Hollywood. We are seeing it everywhere. We are seeing it in development and the shows that are coming out. And it is not a result of the strike. It is just, again, this bubble that was going to always pop at some point. And I do think it's always fun to pick on the like, Apple, what were you doing this whole time? But like... This is a much bigger landscape that they are just also reflecting.
I think it's first of all, I should say we are talking on the day of the finale of Presumed Innocent. You have seen it. I have not seen it. So please don't spoil anything for me because I'm going to make it to the end of that show. But we've been talking about how, hey, they've not done a lot they've not done a lot to promote these shows, but also they have some of the best shows out there right now. Maybe you want to give your top 3 recommendations of Apple TV Plus shows that people should maybe investigate.
Yeah. So I Presumed Innocent is one. It is big and buzzy right now. It is a great legal thriller type drama. I think David E. Kelley has been very hit or miss in the 20 bazillion shows that he has made as part of this streaming boom. And often they suck. This one's great. It is almost entirely in the courtroom, which is really where he shines, like courtroom with a little family drama on the side. Jake Gyllenhaal's eyes are super big and buggy. It's great. It's 100%. A great time. If you are an Apple TV fan and somehow you have not seen Slow Horses,
I haven't.
Slow Horses is eating up the people's brains. I happily, like, you thought Hijack was a good time.
Yeah.
You thought you were ready to sit down and just really relax. You have no idea, my friend. Slow Horses is the peak of this genre.
Love that.
Set aside The Weekend. There's a new season coming out in September.
Yeah.
I liked it even better than the last one.
Amazing.
A great time. The other thing is there are these like weird oddball shows. And I really like For All Mankind, even though last season, sometimes I like it more than others.
Yeah.
But it's such a big, interesting, gutsy, weird space show. I love space like most dads. I love dad, by the way, is obviously a gender neutral term.
Of course.
Love space shows. And I think that show's doing something interesting that most other places have not even thought to try. So
This is
Apple. There's a lot out there.
That's how I would describe Apple. I was like just taking a lot of big swings, being like, I don't know, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Like, what is Schmigadoon? But also, Schmigadoon works for me. I'm on board with Schmigadoon. With all of this said, Kathryn VanArendonk, I got to leave it there. I appreciate your time, friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. Kathryn VanArendonk writes about TV for Vulture. She was speaking about Apple's move to spend a little bit less on making television shows. I'm Alamin Abdul Mahmoud. This is Commotion. That's a bit of favorite. Vampire by NCT 127. By the way, Canadian rapper Mark Lee is a member of this boy band. Look, NCT 127 is headlining a big K-pop convention happening in Los Angeles this weekend. It is called K-Con. It is basically Comic-Con, but for fans of Korean pop music. But this year, the Sunday night concert is going to be live streamed on the CW television network for the very first time. Laura Sirikul is here. She's been covering K-Con for years. I'm talking about way back before K-pop was just beginning to find its feet in North America. Laura, thank you so much for being here, friend.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to come here and chat about this.
Of course, let's get into it. Listen, the whole point of K-Con is to introduce international audiences to K-pop groups. So this move, right, like to sort of televise this thing makes a lot of sense, especially the CW, which caters to like a younger audience. How much pressure is there for this specific broadcast to get it right and be successful, you think?
Well, like many studios, we have to green light projects. Everything depends on the success in order to move forward for more projects to come. And that means numbers and how many people are watching. Is it worth is it worth doing again, or even showing more K-pop stories or K-culture, K-entertainment related coverage? So the pressure is on to succeed for future K-pop, future K-entertainment for mainstream audiences. So hopefully more people do stream it, so we can show proof of this is important and people want to see this.
Okay, that sounds like a lot of pressure, especially to put on, I guess, a pilot, an attempt to do this for the first time. When you look at the lineup at K-Con this year, do you think it has the star power to pull that off?
The problem is NCT 127 for Sunday is a big draw. Zico is a great get, especially with his recent collaboration with Jennie. But unfortunately, she's not going to be there. So it's really, they as a group are great in the K-pop community, NCT 127 and Zico's a solo, but I'm not sure if they will draw in new folks. Adding actors and adding extra people, who are popular, like Kim Soo-young, actor Kim Soo-young, is great, but it's very niche to the K-entertainment community. It's why I see why they're adding elements of Western elements like Aquafina to appease those Western media.
Sure, Aquafina is
audiences.
a bit more familiar to some.
Yeah. So I think it's strong, but we have to see, because it's people. We have to see if it's going to be fans of the groups or people who are just interested in learning about K-pop.
I hear it's been a year of a bunch of setbacks for K-Con in general. Do you want to talk about some of the issues that have popped up in the last year or so?
Yeah, I think it's because the lineup does consist of a lot of fourth generation and fifth generation, majority fourth and fifth generation groups. There are a lot of new groups that are coming in, and it is always great to have new groups perform at KCON, but there's always a headliner that draws them in, and that way people can learn about these new groups. BTS did that, and Stray Kids did that. And there's always a major headliner. And the setbacks is, it's really difficult to get a lot of the major headliners, multiple headliners, to draw people in due to touring and just situations. Ticket sales have vultured a little bit for KCON because it's usually sold out. It's really difficult usually to get tickets, but there's still a lot of tickets available. An Island 2, which is a favorite for Sunday, but they're for fans of the Survival Show, and it's how they discovered ENHYPEN. So this is a new girl group that they're trying to discover. They have visa issues, so they can no longer come. So a lot of fans are disappointed about that. But despite the issues, KCON is still a great experience for K-pop fans and people who want to get into K-culture, because there's a lot more than just K-pop. There's K-beauty there. There's K-dramas. It still has the best infrastructure of all the K-culture festivals. But this year, I feel like it's a little bit struggling on the ticket sales.
Okay, so you said something interesting that I want to maybe spend a minute on here, which is that there's a lot of fourth and fifth generation K-pop groups, which is people may not know. You've been covering KCON for some time. You've been covering KCON since 2014, which is way back when BTS was a new group. And for context, BTS is a third generation K-pop group. What was it like going back to KCON back then compared to what it's like now, do you think?
Obviously the audience, the crowds, it was still crowded. But this last year was 140,000. Back when I did it, it was 17,000 or 20,000.
Wow, that's quite a bit of difference.
There's a big difference. Yeah, there's a big, and they just started at the LA Convention Center, so they had all this space and that much amount of people attending. So it was not that bad to walk around and feel like you're the community, I didn't feel crowded. I felt I had space to really learn about these groups. I had space to go to each vendor and talk to them.
Yeah.
With the amount of people now, there's just massive amount of crowds. It's great because you still get to be in the community of people who love the event, but it does feel like Comic-Con now, from versus when Comic-Con became mainstream. And I've been going to Comic-Con since forever too, but it's just the crowd's difference. And also the ticket sales, prices have gone up dramatically, drastically too.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot more, it's commercialized too. I feel like there's a lot more things the people are trying to sell things. There's a lot more sponsorship. Samsung's there, CJ Entertainment, well, they sponsor it, but a lot of different groups are trying to sell things to you. So I feel like it's a lot more commercialized and market and more capitalism involved.
I can imagine that there's a bit more capitalism involved in the idea of going from 17,000 to 140,000. I mean, I also it sounds quite remarkable, the idea that you would have seen BTS way back then, in a much smaller setting, because one can't even imagine that small a crowd now turning out to see BTS. I got one last question for you. As you sort of look ahead for this weekend, what K-pop groups or idols are you sort of most excited to see this weekend, do you think?
Well, I'm Engine, which is an ENHYPEN fan, and Citizen, and NCT Citizen.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see them, but I'm also excited to see Tiger JK. He's a rapper who never comes here, so it's really exciting to see him. TWS is a new group, and Somi and Cat's Eye are the US Hybe collaboration. So this is their first US debut.
Nice.
And also the actors coming to the event, hosting the event, because this will be the first time we're incorporating actors into KCON.
Yeah. That sounds like it's going to be a great weekend. I hope that you get everything that you're looking for there. Thank you so much for your time, Laura. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Of course. Laura Sirikul is a freelance writer based in Los Angeles. KCON kicks off on Friday in Los Angeles and runs through the weekend. That is it for the podcast today. Listen, before I go, I just want to tell you that tomorrow, I'm really excited about the episode because we're going to be talking about Childish Gambino, but not just the album that he dropped last week. kind of his whole career, his whole shtick, because this is supposed to be the final album that Donald Glover releases under the moniker of Childish Gambino. So we're going to look at what it means for Donald Glover to be retiring that moniker and its entire trajectory. In the meantime, that's it for the show today. My name is Alamin Abdul Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion. By the way, you can find us on Instagram. We are at Commotion CBC. In the meantime, I'll see you tomorrow.